Alright, so I'd like to start off by saying that I'm no means an expert on bus conversions. I'm sort of a jack of all trades. And I've been in a little bit of carpentry, been a little bit into automotive, and I just kind of ask for people's advice in anything that I don't have expertise of some sort in, or know someone with expertise of some sort. So my first suggestion, anyone who's considering getting into a bus build, is that you just spend hours and hours on YouTube watching videos, because you probably don't have an idea for how long this stuff actually takes unless you've already spent hours watching YouTube videos. My second piece of advice, which I wish someone would have told me before I started, is that when you go to the demolition process and you start removing all of the lights and the strobes and all of the things that you may deem unnecessary that a bus may have, try doing it with the bus running, so that way if you cut anything you shouldn't have cut, or you remove something you shouldn't have removed, the bus will hopefully react in a way that will let you know, hey, maybe I should not have removed that or cut that. And also on that note, try not to remove anything in a way that is going to be permanent unless you know that you're not going to be putting it back on, because you might remove something that you deem unnecessary and then later on find out that it is necessary. Another piece of advice I would have is if you start making less progress and you're really just setting yourself back, like a couple times in this video you'll see I'll check the bit on my impact to see if it's stripped, because I've stripped 3 or 4 in a row, and then it's not, it's just that I'm not paying attention because I'm kind of getting in a flow state, or that I don't know, just getting in a hurry happens, and then I strip more screws and create more work for myself, because now I have to go back and grind those heads off later instead of just being able to remove the bolt. So if you start catching yourself getting into that zone, which you see me a couple times, I'll strip 2 or 3 in a row and then I'll just move on to a whole new section. That's usually a good idea for me. It helps me stay in a rhythm without really destroying my progress. Kind of what I'm doing here is just removing all the bolts to these metal side panels that I know I'm gonna be removing them, so I can remove the insulation that's behind them. The insulation that comes in buses has like a R value of like 3, because if you think about it, they're really only transporting kids from, well, you know, like one area to another, so they're not in there for hours at a time. They don't have to maintain the temperature as long. So obviously we're going to be living or staying in this bus for weeks at a time. I want the R value to be more like, you know, somewhere between like 8 and 12, really. Realistically, it's where I'm shooting for. And I'm just going to use a couple different kinds of like house insulation to make that happen. So once I remove all these screws, I'll get into a little later on in the video, be grinding away all these screw heads that I couldn't remove with just an impact and a handful of different bits. Yeah, I've noticed different bits for different buses. I don't know if Thomas uses a specific kind and Bluebird or one of the other brands uses a different kind, but mine has a variety of different sized Phillips heads and even a couple square tips here and there, even some rivets here and there. If you had to remove, if all these screws I were removing here were all rivets, I probably would just opt into covering this stuff up, just because the amount of work you're gonna spend hours grinding instead of, you know, 30 minutes like I do, because I was able to remove probably like 80% of the bolts without having any complications. I know not everyone is that lucky. A lot of people have to do a lot more cutting than I did. Overall, I got pretty lucky. The bus is from Chicago, and it does have some rust damage, but I do have some knowledge in auto body repair, so cutting and welding in some patch panels shouldn't be too big of a problem for me, and I'm sure I'll make a video on that as well. I'm trying to keep this on a budget. I've seen a lot of videos, people spending, you know, 20 to 30,000 on theirs, and I've seen videos of people spending, you know, 5 to 10,000 just trying to keep theirs on a budget. And so I've got a advantage to where I don't really have to pay anyone to do anything. I have sort of a jack of all trades, as I've said, and I have lots of friends, and I'm pretty good at utilizing material and not wasting. There's a lot of things that you can recycle from other jobs, or things that some people would just throw away that you can repurpose. I think that's really going to be a part of my build. I think that's one of the cool things about building a Schoolie, is that you can sort of not really bend the rules, because there isn't really rules, as long as you make it presentable and safe in the eyes of your BMV and or your insurance company, depending on, some people have problems with one and some with the other. One thing to be mindful of when you're kind of getting into the grinding section of this is to try not to just throw sparks directly in your face, and definitely wear your PPE. A dust mask would probably have done, but since I'm a painter, I have a handful of respirators laying around. I just went ahead and threw one of those on instead. Of course, safety glasses, and definitely get some flame retardant gloves. These ones were alright, but after grinding on, throwing sparks on my hands for 30 minutes, there was a couple spots that burned through. You see a couple times where I catch myself adjusting the cutting disc, because I'm throwing sparks right at myself, and it's not that hard to just rotate it 90 degrees and be throwing it in a different direction instead of right on yourself. So it's just one of those things to be conscious of the direction that you're throwing sparks. One thing I will also mention is, while you've got all these extension cords, or in some people's cases they've got air hoses running into the side of the bus, and you're cutting this metal, you're going to be creating sharp edges, and when you're peeling this stuff off and tossing it around, there's a chance that you're going to sever some electrical, maybe cut through an air hose. So my advice is just to be a little cautious when you're doing this sort of thing. I did tear up one of my grinders. I dropped a piece of metal I just cut directly on the cord, and had to repair it. Luckily, I've done that sort of thing before, so it wasn't that tough. But in some people's cases, they might end up just tossing that whole grinder and having to buy a new one, which is kind of a bummer, or can be. think one thing that some people don't think about is if you just try to be mindful of what you remove, keep the metal stuff together, the trash together. You can pretty easily convince someone who does scrapping to just take your trash for you if you let them take the scrap. Like, they won't make a ton of money off of it, but a lot of places do scrap and trash, so they can separate it in the truck bed and they can grab all your metal and all your trash and get rid of it at the same place for little to no hassle. And that's kind of what I did. I just had a couple different people who wanted some of the scrap metal, and I just had them take a load of trash with them in exchange for the metal, helped them load it up, helped them dump it, or in some of them I didn't even have to help. Some people were more than willing to help me, which I think you'll be surprised that most people will take 10-15 minutes out of their day to give you a hand, as long as you're not asking them to do 4 hours of labor for free. Most people are relatively considerate.